Welcome back to the discussion Enhancing the Work from Home Experience for Federal Employees, sponsored by Poly on Federal News Network. My guests today are Joe McReel, U.S. Federal Channel Business Manager at Poly, and Ed Roman, U.S. Federal SE Manager at Poly. I'm your moderator, Scott Massioni. And Joe and Ed, we were talking about, the work from home environment that we're dealing with right now. Everyone is familiar with Zoom. Everyone's familiar with Microsoft Teams and all those other platforms. How does Poly fit in with those, sort of ubiquitous at this point apps?
Oh, sure. So I think what's happened is that obviously everyone's experiencing the same thing in the past 6 months, is that there's been a big shift. And with that shift comes a little bit of a shock factor when you're all of a sudden having to work from home with the tools that you normally would use in the office. And so what happens is there's been an exponential adoption of Zoom for video collaboration and content, as well as with Teams. And Poly has had a long history with Microsoft, all the way back to Live Meeting Server, and it really having this what we call like a native interoperability solution with that platform. Now, we had been working with Zoom and Microsoft over the past year. Coincidentally, with what has happened with COVID, the timeliness of that was actually, was very well suited for being able to support the needs of the federal government as they started to shift to home use. And so what happened was users came home, had their laptop, and initially, oh, this is different, and they got used to it. And then they started not really getting used to it. They started to realize things like, the laptop I was issued 3 years ago, the camera is kind of not that good, or the audio on my laptop speakers are not that good, so I need to get some other speakers, or I need to maybe get a headset. And so what's ended up happening is that for us, we've been developing native interoperability on these call control platforms so that our headsets work and can incite or invoke a Teams call, so that our endpoints can speak natively in that communications language, and so that the user experience is transparent in that the user interface is very familiar and similar to what they're used to seeing perhaps on a PC or on another device. And so that really helps enable the new teleworker and helps them embrace these tools, because it makes it very easy for them to use and to be comfortable as well, because we make our headsets very comfortable, because you have to wear them for a long time. They have to have longevity, they have to have battery life. So these are all things that, as Poly, we think of well ahead of time, and we're just very sensitive to addressing customer challenges and trying to make your home work life as simple as it was when you were working in the office.
So it sounds like your goal is to almost have people realize that you're not there. It's, you kind of want to be an invisible facilitator in a way.
I think across the industry, the goal is technology transparency and just enabling communications, right, as if you were there. I think definitely, Scott.
And, I wanted to ask, as COVID really started in the beginning, there was this huge demand for telecommunications, as we were saying. How did you deal with that influx of demand, and how did the infrastructure deal with this? How did the government deal with it? And, what were some of the repercussions, and where are we now with that? Are we still sort of catching up?
That's a great question, because we're very fortunate, because both of the companies that created Poly, we have have always had a relentless commitment to the end user experience. It's always been, we've always focused on that your job is what you do, not where you are. Even before the pandemic, we've been very passionate about equipping the worker with devices, whether they're personal devices, video solutions, phones, et cetera, that make that transition from remote to the office, just as Ed mentioned earlier, seamless, consistent, and transparent. So I think, that it has been for us almost a rewarding experience to see that, these devices that sometimes as peripherals didn't always get a high priority on, of importance. And now people are realizing, if I'm going to spend 6-7 hours a day going from meeting to meeting to meeting, I don't want to be retooling and rebooting and restarting depending on which meeting I'm going to. And that's why we've always been, again, I mentioned that term earlier, agnostic. We really look at what's out there and how can we best support it so that your experience in any of these meetings is of excellent quality, but is also just ease of use for you, and something that you can, take this same environment and drop it back in an office environment, however that may look, and still have the same tools available to you for those meetings.
So speaking of that ease of use and the transparency, something that we don't think about is, if someone could be in here listening to our conversation and we don't know about it, that's a transparency that we don't want. How can you ensure the security of these sorts of proprietary information and all the sorts of things that everyone thinks that they're doing in private through telecommunications?
When it comes to security, it's a very sensitive point for us. We have a very much a big focus on the DoD market as far as encryption is concerned. So all of our video products support, government, federal grade encryption standards, so that when you have calls, you'll see a lock indication on a video call to know that this is actually an encrypted call. And we've been doing that for, feels like since the beginning of time, but we've been doing that for a very, very long time. And so we also have that capability of encryption on our decked headsets as well. So, a lot of people can't appreciate the breadth of headset capabilities and types of users when it comes to headsets. There's mobile users, there's people that are going to be, switching many devices, and they're going to need to switch between a phone and a laptop and a PC and an end system, and they still need to be able to have that fluid interconnectivity. So we have those in our devices, and then in our DEC devices, we have enhanced encryption when you actually need to get further away from perhaps your PC, and you want to still be able to have that secure communication. So they're designed for different environments, but security is always top of mind when it comes to our products. And then we also have a bridging infrastructure that also provides encryption.
So you're saying there's security from the earphone to the computer, and then also from the computer to wherever you're broadcasting to or talking to. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. So when we supplement a different call control platform, like perhaps Zoom or Teams, the encryption standard is going to be based on what they provide across the cloud. But when you're having point-to-point communications, you could have encrypted communications with Poly. Or if you're having what's called standard-based 323 or SIP-based communications on a standards-based infrastructure, then we can provide that security as well.
And we're going to take one more break. I'm your moderator, Scott Maucione, on the discussion Enhancing the Work from Home Experience for Federal Employees, sponsored by Poly on Federal News Network.